Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give it another minute or so for people to join us, and we will get started momentarily. All right, everybody, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to this Elon University Family Webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing housing selection for the 25-26 academic year. We're joined today by several folks from the Residence Life office. Didn't introduce myself. I'm Will Robertson with the Office of Parent Engagement. And like I said, we are joined today by several folks from the Residence Life office. I'm going to kick it over to Kirsten Carrier. She is the Assistant Dean of Campus Life and the Director of Residence Life. She joined Elon a couple years ago in 2022. And her team, she has some team members here that will be able to answer your questions using the Q&A down below. So you can just click on that Q&A and ask questions as they come up throughout the webinar, and the team will be able to answer them via that function. So I'm going to pass it over to Kirsten.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. Appreciate that introduction. And like Will said, I've got a couple colleagues on the call as well today. So you'll see Danielle Vosberg, one of our associate directors here in Residence Life. Danielle's going to be answering a lot of your questions in your Q&A, and she works directly with our housing operations. So everything regarding housing selection, the processes we're about to talk about. And then Molly Mancuso is on here as well, our housing coordinator, helping with all of those day-to-day operations. And so please let us know when you go through the presentation today. If you do have individual questions, you can definitely ask them in the chat, but always follow up with us later too if you'd like to run through a really specific scenario for your student or just want a little bit more advice. We are certainly available here in the Central Residence Life office to help. So like Will said, we're going to do kind of a top to bottom how our returning student housing selection process here at Elon works. It is pretty much the same from past years. If you have a student who is returning to the process, has done it before, then here will be some great reminders and good ideas of things to start thinking about. But if you have a student who's a rising sophomore and has not yet done this process, then you are in the right place to make sure you get all the information you need for our upcoming deadlines. So I'm going to dive into all of this. This is going to be recorded and posted later, yes, but we do have our info session website as well with a lot of information on it. So hopefully you'll find almost every question you have answered on our housing selection websites. You are certainly welcome to reach out with those specific scenarios as well. So what is new in our housing selection process this year? Like I said, a lot is the same, but we always like to look at student feedback and change the things that we need to as we go. So we do have more campus housing available this year than ever before. And so as you may know, Elon built a couple new residential areas in this past year. Our new East Commons building brought 90 new beds, and then our new Eco Village brought 12 new beds. And so we built more beds, but we did not enroll more first-year students, and that's because We have heard over the years that our rising juniors and seniors do want to continue to live on campus. And so we've increased our capacity for on-campus housing for those rising juniors and seniors. And so hopefully we have more of those folks joining us this year. And so because of the additional housing, we are allowing apartment lease renewals in every single apartment area on campus. And so if your student currently lives in an apartment, they can stay put in their same apartment, just fill it up with the rest of their friends so that you have a full apartment. And on renewal day, it's not any time pressure, you just renew your same space. And so that's a great option. Or if your student knows someone who's in an apartment and needs to fill a space, your student could apply to live in that space with your, that person who has availability. So lease renewals in all apartments are open this year. We also don't have a housing reservation fee this year. And so in the past, students had to pay money to participate in our process, but we leveled the playing field, and any student who applies with that housing application will have access to the process. So no money needed up front. This is more for our students to know, but it's been helpful for them in terms of planning that we are keeping the same housing selection time throughout all the processes. And you'll see there's different processes they can participate in. In the past, the time would change between each process, which was to the students' benefit, but also made it harder to plan. And so this time we have the same time that the students would need to log in to do their part of the process this year. We also are encouraging our students to fill up those apartments, fill up your roommate groups for Daniel Flats by using Today at Elon. We have a great want to add section on Today at Elon that's only accessible with an Elon login. So it is just for the Elon community. So if your student doesn't have anyone to live with for next year yet, or they're looking for that one more person to pull into their roommate group, Today at Elon is the one-stop shop where we encourage folks to go, advertise you're looking for someone, advertise you're looking for housing, and hopefully help match up with other roommate groups. We also have some new living learning communities for next year, and that living learning community application deadline is one of the quickest that's approaching here on February 1st. But 3 new LLCs that our returning students would be welcome to apply to. It's Living with Data, Mikasa, and Health Sciences. And so more information on those LLCs are on the website as well. And we do have a new option for renters insurance built into the application. I think this is so important for parents, for families to know and understand. And that is the first page of the housing application. And so I'll show you what that means in a moment, but it's so important to protect your students' items, but also any damage they may do to the building itself, to the room itself. That is something that they would be held liable for if that's something that they do to the building. And so it's important that they and you all understand that there is renters insurance out there that does apply to campus housing. It's not just for off-campus apartments, it is for anywhere your student might choose to live, including on campus. And so we do have a new partnership to help you access renters insurance right in the housing application. All right, so starting big picture, who is housing selection for? It's for all of our enrolled undergraduate students. And so those roommate groups do have to be formed with current students. This is not a process for any incoming students. This is not for incoming transfer students or incoming first-year students. If a student's currently on a leave of absence, they can still participate. But students who have graduated or are withdrawing from the university, who are incoming from the fall, this is not their process. We do have other processes for those folks. And if you do have a student who's studying abroad next fall 2025, we do encourage them not to participate in this process, but that does come with some caveats because if they secure housing for fall, there's a couple options they can do, including turning that apartment lease over to somebody else for the fall, and then hopefully accepting that back for the spring when they return. Or in the fall, they could do an apartment buyout, which means paying for keeping that space empty for the fall term while they're abroad. And then they would return to that space in the spring because it would still be designated for them. So there's a couple options, but they certainly do not have to participate in housing selection right now. If they're abroad in the fall, we will offer a winter spring application in October, November next fall, where those students would apply for housing for the following winter or spring, and we would help place them into spaces, or they would be accepting a lease turnover from someone else. So a couple ways to navigate that, but if your student's abroad next fall, they don't have to do anything unless they would like to do something, especially with apartments and apartment groups. And I should mention too, again, my colleagues are definitely answering your great questions that are coming in via the Q&A. So take a look at those. If you've had some questions so far, they might have been answered in there already by somebody else. If I see some themes, I'll try to bring them into the presentation as well. So these are the really easy steps that your student has to do in order to apply for housing. You have to apply for housing. They go to this website, elon.edu/myhousing, and they need to apply by February 10th. It's a pretty simple application. It will ask them if they want renter's insurance up front. It'll ask them some questions about our policies, if they'll agree to those. It'll ask them if they have any accommodations that they would like accommodated for next year, if they want to apply for a living learning community that is in this application. And again, that LLC deadline is February 1st, so make sure that they are submitting that application by February 1st if they are applying for an LLC. Otherwise, it is a pretty simple application. They submit that. That tells us they want to participate in the upcoming processes. Again, rising sophomores required to live on campus, so you'll want to make sure you do fill that out by February 10th. If our rising sophomores miss that deadline, they get deprioritized in the process. They're required to live on campus, but if they don't meet that deadline, they're going to go at the back of the line and get the last selection of housing. So definitely encourage them to make sure that them and all their roommates and friends have all applied by at least February 10th, letting us know they're ready to participate in the process. So you apply. Then you'll get access to roommate matching. That's on the exact same website. So on elon.edu/myhousing, the roommate matching portal is the same thing they use for incoming student roommate matching if they did it then. It's a pretty simple step where they request someone to be their roommate, and that roommate has to accept, mutually match their request. And everyone in the group has to have done that process, mutually matched with each other to say, yes, I do want to participate and I want to live together as a group. And I will put the caveat out there that our housing is different sizes depending on what they choose, whether it's a 2-person or a 4-person or an 8-person. And so we'll go over what those roommate group sizes are in a moment. But mutually matching will only open after someone has applied. And so I know we get the question, my friend is looking for me, they can't find me. Well, it's because you haven't applied yet. They have to apply, then you get access to roommate matching. After they're matched up, they're going to look at our housing selection timeline, and they're going to be getting that housing selection priority time. So maybe their time is 10:02, which would be a pretty good time. That's in the morning. So all of our selection processes run from 9 to 4. And they'll get a time that's somewhere between 9 to 4. On the timeline, it'll show them the different days that they have availability to select, depending on what they're looking for. And I'll show you that in a moment. And so all they have to do is the person with the best time in their group logs onto this website on that day, sees what's available at their time, selects it for their group, and then puts everyone into the appropriate bed spaces in that flat or in that suite or in that apartment. So everyone has their spaces. Once they click submit, that's it. They've selected their spaces for the upcoming year, and that is a confirmed assignment at that point. They will get a kickback email to everyone in that group saying, hey, you just got assigned a housing space for next year. Here's who it is. Here are your suite mates. And then they're all done. So apply, match, select are those 3 important steps. Renter's insurance. So I've mentioned this a couple times so far. It is the first page your student will see on the housing application. And so I wanted to take a moment just to talk about that. Again, it is a new partnership we have with GradGuard, who is an insurance company across the nation offering insurance for college students. What's unique about this insurance policy is that it is really low deductibles. And so you might think that your student is covered under your homeowner's insurance, which they may be while they're at college, but oftentimes homeowners insurance or other insurance policies have very high deductibles. And so you might want to consider even getting this additional policy. I've seen about $180, $200 for insuring them for the year. And this does also apply to them wherever they are during that year. So it's not just about renter's insurance for their space on campus, but it's also for their life on campus. And so, they get a laptop, they left a laptop outside of the library and someone took it, or maybe there was some damage that occurred based on an issue in the residence hall. All of those situations, or traveling abroad, that situation would be covered under this insurance policy, not just about where you live, but about you as a student being covered. And so definitely take a moment to look at this option. Your student, when they log in, will have the option to, yes, buy the insurance if they'd like to, but they can also say, send this information to someone else. I want my family to know about this option. They do not have to be the one that purchased it on the application. They can just say, send me the information, or send this information to my family so you can understand more about that process. This is offered here, but it's also offered year-round. You can log in anytime and purchase. It does not have to be purchased at the time of doing the application. We're just wanting to raise students' awareness of that option. Some overview here too with our process. When the student has, they are eligible for a returning student housing process, they're going to want to know which of the two processes they're participating in. We have two main processes. Rising juniors and seniors participate together because those are the two groups we don't require to live on campus, and so they go first to fill up available bed space. And then our rising sophomores we do require to live on campus. And so those are two separate processes. So make sure our students kind of know which of the two processes they're involved with. I know the terms junior and senior and sophomore can get confusing sometimes, but it is not based on how many credits you have. It is not based on how many credits you're bringing into the university or anything like that. We base, for housing processes, we base that on how many terms you've lived on campus. And so someone who is going to be qualified as a rising sophomore is anyone who has lived on campus one prior term. And so if that's someone who's lived here in the fall, or they're a new spring transfer student, they will have lived on campus for one prior term as of housing selection, either the current term or the previous term. And that would be a rising sophomore. Anyone who's got greater than one prior term, so two prior terms or more, is that junior and senior status. And so that's how we talk about processes: rising sophomores, rising juniors and seniors. What will they be for next year, right? And like I said, we do have that 2-year residency requirement for our first and second year students. So where do students live through this process? We do have kind of neighborhoods that are generally based on class age and stage. And so here's an idea of how we house our students. And our first year students, we have 2 first year only neighborhoods, East and Historic, and that might be where your student lives right now. They would be moving to a different neighborhood then for sure for their sophomore year. So rising sophomores generally live in Colonnades, Danieli, Global, Loy, Crest, and Oaks. And so you can see most of those rising sophomores will live in residence hall style, Danieli flat style, apartment style, and less of them in apartments like Oaks and Crest, but still some. And Loy, our fraternity and sorority community, is definitely somewhere that a lot of our sophomores would opt to live. Rising juniors and seniors are often in our apartment neighborhoods, definitely available for them to live in any of our apartment neighborhoods, but this is generally where we see them living: Station, Park Place, and Oaks. So here's a little visual for you. Where do most, again, rising sophomores, so next year, where do our sophomores live? A lot of our sophomores do live in Danieli Flats, followed shortly by our Danieli apartments. Loy housing coming up next. Oaks, a lot of folks really look forward to that apartment style living, but we do not have that many apartment style options open for rising sophomores, but we have some that do end up in Oaks, and then you'll see the rest in Colonnades, Global, and some in the apartments at Crest. And again, here's kind of where our juniors and seniors live to start kind of norming that for you, but most of our juniors and seniors do end up living off campus for those years. But like I said, we have more housing available this coming academic year than we ever have before. So we do hope that a bunch of our rising juniors and seniors do choose to stay with us here at Elon as well. I'll take a moment to explain that we have 2 different types of housing at Elon that are pretty distinct in terms of cost and amenities. And if you have a current student going through this process for the first time, it's going to be really important to take a moment to talk with them about what type of housing they're hoping for, but also what type of housing they may end up in. Because like I said, a lot of our rising sophomores may be really interested in apartment style housing, but we have a limited quantity of that. So they may end up in a residence hall style housing. And so you saw a moment ago that a lot of our rising sophomores will end up in our Danieli Flats community, which is a wonderful kind of middle ground between an apartment and a residence hall. And so, definitely love the Danieli Flats style, but those are considered residence halls. So our residence halls have double room, single room, triple room prices, and that's the same price no matter where you are on campus, where our apartment cost does vary based on which apartment style is chosen. And so apartments do have a higher cost because we also start apartment leases in summer. So June 1st for returning students, June 15th for new leases. And so you do start paying for that space earlier. We do have a 10-month apartment as well in the Crest apartments where you don't pay for summer housing. But most apartments you're kind of paying year round, where in the residence halls, you only pay for the academic year. Residence halls do open and close for all of our break periods. And so, we're coming up on spring break. The residence halls will close for spring break, but the apartments stay open year round. And so there's some advantages to those two different options. So take a moment to kind of understand what style of housing your student might be thinking about, what are the costs of those different styles, to understand kind of what those options might be as they make those choices. Of course, your students probably not going through this process by themselves. They probably have some other students that they're pulling into a roommate group. And so if they do want to live in a specific building or room type, they do have to make a group that fits that space. And so we can kind of see some opportunities in here that we have different space styles. And so the next slide actually, there you go, shows you the different quantities of students you would need for the different spaces. And so we do have some singles available for rising sophomores and juniors and seniors in residence hall spaces. We don't have any apartments that are only one person living by themselves. All of our apartments are either 2, 3, or 4 people living together. But we have some singles still available in Global and Colonnades. And then Daniel Lee Flats, we have some singles, but that's in a 4-person apartment. And so if you've got one person, there's some options for where you might be able to live. We have double rooms, throughout campus housing. So, a roommate group of 2 is just fine in a double room in a residence hall, or we do have 2-person apartments in the Oaks. And I'll say that is the most popular style of apartment. And so if your student is looking at getting a 2-person Oaks, great, try for that, but also have a backup plan. And I'll tell that to every student. Have kind of plan A, B, and C. Like, I really want that Oaks 2-person, but if we don't get it, let's try to get a Dan apartment. But if we don't get that, let's try to, join my friends in a Dan flat in a double room for next year. So kind of have a couple different options, because during the process, it is dynamic. They'll try for an apartment, but maybe all the apartments will be gone by the time their selection time comes up. So then they have to try for something else during the next process. So definitely look at a few different options. They will see kind of what this looks like as it rolls out. But here's how many people you would need for each types of space. We also get a lot of questions about what do these spaces look like, and our websites are great. Our neighborhood websites have photos of all the different room styles, so they can say, like, what is a Daniel Lee, double in a flat, and what is that different than a Daniel Lee double in an apartment? There's going to be pictures so you can see kind of the differences between amenities and layouts and things like that on our websites, on the neighborhood pages. So we do have a housing and emotional support animal ESA accommodation process as well that is built into the housing application. So if your student is seeking either a housing accommodation for the first time, or if they're seeking a continuation of their exact same housing accommodation, or maybe they have a small change they would like to make to their current accommodation, that is also a part of our process. So they do need to submit the housing application by January 31st at noon, saying, hey, I have an accommodation I'd like to request, renew, or change a little bit. So meet that deadline, the 31st at noon. And there are some paperwork packets they will also need to be doing with disabilities resources by that date and time. And so if it is a continuing accommodation request with no changes, they don't have anything else they have to do with the accommodations office with disabilities resources. At that point, we will just continue their exact same accommodation type from one year to the next. If they are requesting a change to the accommodation, or if they're very first time registering for accommodations, they do need to both complete our housing application and register with disabilities resources to complete their full housing accommodations packet, including paperwork and documentation. So there's some steps there. And then our emotional support animal process, we do have students hopefully communicating with their roommate groups if they do have an ESA that is continuing from the previous year. But sometimes these are new ESA requests as well, and those are rolling deadlines, and more information will be on the Disabilities Resources website. We do encourage students to have those conversations with roommate groups as they're entering into housing selection processes. This is a great flow chart we made this year. It's on our website. It's this website below. If you just Google Elon housing selection accommodations, you will find it. This is a bit of a step-by-step for students, depending on what type of accommodation they are seeking, about what do I need to do in the process. And again, that really important deadline of January 31st at noon to get these steps done. Our living learning community process is, like I said, coming up here fast as well. And so I already highlighted a couple of our new communities this year. If you don't know, Elon is ranked #1 in the nation for our living learning community. So this is a huge hallmark experience at Elon, but also just a really exciting opportunity to kind of get a new community, to meet more folks in a rising sophomore or junior and senior year. I often get asked, if my student wasn't in an LLC their first year, can they be in an LLC in their second year? Yes. There are some LLCs that are first year only. And so we don't have every single LLC option here like they did last year. Some of these are upper class only. So you'll see our international house is where we house exchange students along with domestic students who are here at Elon. A great experience to kind of get that international experience, and that's only available for upper class students. Same thing with our new Eco Village LLC at Lowey Farm, only available for upper class students. So definitely encourage your students to check out the different options. Really great too if they don't necessarily have a roommate group for next year, and they're looking to maybe explore a new interest area, a new discipline. This is a great option. Kind of creates that community immediately in their sophomore or beyond years. So the LLC process, again, in the housing application, the last question is, are you interested in applying to any LLCs? Yes, no. If they are, they list their top 2 and give us a little why they're applying for those. They want to make sure they have submitted the housing application by February 1st. And then on February 12th, our returning students will be notified if they got accepted. And so between the 1st and the 12th, our LLC advisors are reviewing all of those applications that come in. They do have a specific number of returning students that they can accept to that LLC. So not everyone can get accepted. There is a specific number. The 12th, the students would get notified, hey, you got accepted to this LLC, congratulations. And then they would be given a time on February 20th when they'd be logging into our selection process, because even though they're going into an LLC, they do get a chance to select their own bed space for next year within the LLC. And so on February 20th is the date when those returning students select LLC spaces. Just like last year, as a reminder, if they have a roommate that they'd like to live with, the roommate also needs to have met these deadlines, applied, and get accepted to the LLC in order to be roommates for next year. All right, so that's the LLC process. For our rising juniors and seniors, like I said, they kind of go first in terms of our 2 big processes. We've got rising juniors and seniors, and we've got rising sophomore processes. So for our rising juniors and seniors, the first thing we do is after our deadline has passed for the application, then we give everyone a housing selection time, that priority time. Those are completely randomly assigned. I often get asked, are they based on GPA? Are they based on when I applied? They are based on nothing except a randomized order. And so all the rising juniors and seniors get lumped together. We assign out random selection times. And so again, they can be from any time from 9 to 4. And so I might have a 3:30 time, but my roommate has a 9:04 time. 9:04 would be a great time. And so the person in my roommate group who has the earliest number is the one that needs to be logging into the system and be ready to select on our date and time. So my friend with the 9:04 time is the one that has to log into the system, at 9:04 and be ready to select our bed space, because by the time my 3:30 time rolls around, we may not have as many options available. So our rising juniors and seniors, again, submit that deadline application by the deadline, February 10th. Housing's not guaranteed, but we got a lot of it available, and they're going to get those selection times. Here's an idea of our rising juniors and seniors process, and just, deep breaths, because it is a little bit more complicated than our sophomores, because our juniors and seniors often already live in apartment style housing, and they can renew their apartment style housing. And so you'll see that is kind of what this process is shaped around. So anyone who currently lives at Station at Mill Point, which is a very desirable place to live on campus for our juniors and seniors, they have the first go at the process. So current residents can renew their same space. And so that means if I am a current junior going into my senior year next year, I'm a rising senior, and I am an apartment, but all 3 of my apartment mates are graduating. If I want to stay in my same apartment for next year, I need to find 3 new friends to fill my apartment by February 13th. And all 4 of us need to have submitted the housing application, roommate matched, and then we need to have found each other so that by February 13th, me as the one person who's still in the apartment from one year to the next will log in, will renew my same space, and I will put my 3 friends into the bed spaces in my apartment and click submit. So that's how renewals work. If somebody in the space does have to be continuing from one year to the next in the space, and it could be 2 or 3 people, but we don't do partial renewals. So if you've got an apartment of 4 people, but only 2 people are renewing for next year, they have to find a group of 2 to fill the apartment, or they cannot renew the space. And so that's why, again, going on today at Elon, finding someone else to fill those spaces to pull in for renewal day is going to be really important. And that's going to be happening here in the next few weeks for sure. So station residents renew their same spaces, and then we let people into station as new residents. And these are typically full 4-person groups selecting into station as a full group. And then we do the same thing for Park Place. You know, some folks who currently live in Park Place, maybe they got into station the previous day. Great. That means their apartments are going to be available for new residents of Park Place. And so Park Place residents can renew their space. And then a couple days later, new residents can select into Park Place. And then our last couple processes, all the other apartments, so Daniel Lee Crest and Oaks students in all of those apartments can renew their same space. Because again, some of those folks in Oaks probably got pulled up into station or into Park Place during the previous processes. If they didn't, they want to just renew their same space, great. Renew their same space, fill it up with the other people, make sure it's a full group of either 4 or 2, and they would just renew their same space. And then that last day is new residents. And so we've got rising juniors and seniors that would be selecting remaining apartment spaces, that would be selecting remaining residence hall spaces. We will always have some residence hall spaces available, including singles on campus in residence halls like Colonnades and Global available on that last day. So that's what the junior senior process looks like. They're going to receive that housing selection time. You can see just a couple days in advance of the process so that they know when to log in, who's got the best time. It is their same time for each process. And so, their time is 12:01. Maybe 12:01 wasn't good enough to get them into station new residence day. Maybe they use their 12:01 time in Park Place and they get a group of 3 into Park Place. And that's why it's important that, again, communicate with those roommates, figure out who has the earliest time, but also figure out some flexibility, like figure out some plan A, plan B, and what's going to work for your group. Because, the group of 4 might be great for station, but if you didn't get into station, then you may have to figure out how to break down into a group of 3 for Park Place day. So important there. I think I already said this about apartment renewal, kind of what does apartment renewal mean? What does it look like? There does have to be someone who currently lives in that space, at least one person renewing that same space. Only rising juniors and seniors can live in station and Park Place. And so we don't allow rising sophomores to live in those 2 communities, so they cannot join roommate groups of those 2 communities. And students who don't renew their space, and so let's say, I'm one person and on renewal day, I still haven't found my other 3 people, they can't renew their same space by themselves. That means that their apartment will now go up for new residents to potentially select in that coming station process. So that's what apartment renewal looks like. And after that process is over, we do not allow our rising juniors and seniors to participate in the rising sophomore process. Those are 2 separate processes. So we're going to talk about the sophomore process now, but also we do have resources available if your student is choosing to live off campus for next year as a rising junior and senior. You can definitely still point them to these resources. We have a list of all of the local apartment complexes that students have rented from previously, and then we do encourage them to still use today at Elon the want to add section to maybe find roommate groups even in off-campus situations. So all those are great resources for them. So juniors and seniors go first. Then we do have our Loy fraternity and sorority housing process. So if your student is maybe currently rushing on campus, like our sororities are in recruitment phase right now, this is their timeline for what that Loy housing selection process looks like. So by Wednesday, February 12th, our sorority presidents will submit to us their house rosters. And so it is completely up to the organizations to make those selections of who's going to be living in the house next year. Included in who's going to live in the house, we also ask them to give us at least 2 people that are living in the house to apply to be our house managers. House managers are part of the residence life team. They live in the house just with the other students. They have a leadership role in the house. We have staff meetings and we do encourage folks to look at the opportunity. It's very similar to an RA. It does have a compensation package, but has a different scope of responsibilities. So by February 12th, your student would know, am I or am I not accepted into that sorority house for next year? And then fraternities, they have a little bit longer, so since their recruitment is a little bit later than sororities. And so by February 24th is when our presidents of fraternities will be submitting us to their rosters. So you have an idea here kind of how that process goes. And if your student has questions about how and why do some folks get accepted into houses or not, again, once they've rushed and recruited, that is conversations to have with those student organizations. All right, our rising sophomore process. These are for folks who are current first-year students living on campus, or for folks who just, are about to start the academic year here in the next couple days. So for our incoming transfer students, our incoming new students that just started the spring term with us, they are also doing the rising sophomore process to help select spaces for next year. I know it can feel quick. You just got to Elon and now you're selecting your housing for next year, but hopefully it's something to kind of jump on, and we definitely talked to you about it during orientation as well. So just like our rising juniors and seniors, all of our rising sophomores who met the deadline to apply for housing will be given that random housing selection time. And again, randomized, not based on anything, randomized within everyone who applied on time. And then folks who do apply late, we put at the end of the line so that the folks who did meet our deadlines are prioritized. If they have a roommate group, the person in the roommate group that has the earliest time, once they get them, should be the one that is kind of going to be deputized to be selecting the space on behalf of the group. Everyone has to have submitted that housing application, and we do have housing guaranteed for our rising sophomores. So you can see the sophomore process is a lot more condensed than our rising junior and senior process. There are 3 processes. So the first one is Danieli Flats. Like you saw, most of our rising sophomores do end up in Danieli Flats. And again, the Danieli Flat is kind of like a mini apartment, but it is a residence hall still. And so it is a hallway with 4 double rooms, 2 bathrooms. They have in-unit laundry, and they have a kitchenette space and their own living room. So very similar to an apartment, except that it is not a full kitchen, and they are double rooms, not single rooms. So those Danieli Flats are 4 double rooms, so 8 people in each flat. And so we do prioritize groups that can get 8 people together and fully roommate matched and ready to go on March 6th. You get your housing selection first. You get to be placed together. And there are some Dan flats that do have full kitchens, so something to keep an eye out for your students who maybe really do want a full kitchen. There are a few that do, and we have those listed on our website, on the Danieli neighborhood website. So full groups of 8 sign up first for Dan flats. If your student is kind of like, I'm not interested in a Dan flat, I really want to try for an apartment, well, their time's going to come up a few days later. So March 10th is when all of our rising sophomores who want to sign up for apartments would try. And again, this is where that selection time comes in. If they've got a time that's, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, that's pretty good. If they've got a time that's more like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, they're probably not going to be selecting an apartment. Those apartments do go pretty quickly for our rising sophomores. We don't have as many apartments as our rising sophomores often want, but that's again where that planning comes in. So if they didn't get an apartment, that last step of the process is when our students will sign up for any residence hall spaces in Global and Colonnades, and then remaining Danieli Flat spaces. We've run this process for a few years now, and our Danieli Flats of 8 people have never filled up on the first day. And so that's typically a good rest assured thing. If you've gotten a group of 8 together, you're going to get a Danieli Flat on that first day, which is great. Always have Danieli Flats still available on that last day as well. And so, if your group of 8 was really trying for 2 apartments of 4 on the apartment day, but then it didn't happen, well, you can still get together as a group of 8 on that last day. And typically there are still full Danieli Flats available on that day. So definitely take a look. But we also let students that are groups of 2, 1 select into these Danieli Flat spaces to fill them up. So by March 12th, all of those sophomore processes will be done. So you can see when they get their selection time is right before the processes start. They get the same time throughout each process. Roommate with the earliest time is the one that selects on behalf of the group. We do have a couple of roommate socials coming up. And so again, I know our students are really good at finding each other and finding roommate groups, but also we love to offer an in-person option for students who maybe want to meet new people or are really looking for something different. Then these roommate socials are great. We usually get some pretty good turnout for these. So encourage your student to come on out if they don't quite have a roommate group yet, or maybe they have a roommate group, but they just need to add 1 more person. This is a great place to actually meet people and have some conversation, and these are facilitated by our staff. And so a couple options there, one that's kind of coordinated with the junior senior process and one that's really more targeted towards our rising sophomores. Here's the big old 1 slide with all the dates all at once. You can see how it all kind of flows together. It's a little scary, so we don't need to dwell on this too much. But you will see that one note that we do have a sophomore residency exemption process. We open that up at the very end after all the other processes are complete. And so again, we do have a 2-year residency requirement, and each year we don't quite know how many or if we will offer any sophomores to be released from that residency requirement. And so if your student was hoping to live off campus next year and they are a rising sophomore, they are going to want to participate in the full sophomore selection process. They are going to want to secure some kind of on-campus housing, because we're going to take a look at the numbers after sophomore selection, and we'll make a decision at that point whether we're even going to be able to offer a residency exemption process on that day. So that would be after the processes, so everyone should select something, but if we offer it, it'll be right there at the end. Those are all the wonderful slides I have, and I know there's been some great Q&A going on. Wow, 45 questions, that seems like a lot of answering, so just shout out to Danielle and Molly for answering so many great questions. I'm going to take just one moment and scroll through, see if there's anything that I can help provide more clarity on. I think we're doing really great on information. Right. As a wonderful clarification, I feel like I didn't dwell on that piece. One thing, there's a question about our rising sophomores. Can sophomores get pulled up into the junior and senior processes? I don't think I clearly said that, because I said juniors and seniors cannot participate in sophomore processes, but yes, sophomores can get pulled into roommate groups of rising juniors and seniors. We just don't see it as often, because oftentimes those rising juniors and seniors are going for station and Park Place, and those no sophomores can live in. But if there is a junior or senior group that is currently in Oaks, let's say there's 4-person group in Oaks, and 2 of them are rising seniors for next year, or rising juniors, then yes, they could pull in 2 rising sophomores to fill those spaces. So that is an opportunity. Your students who are rising sophomores can roommate group with rising juniors and seniors to access that rising junior and senior process. That means they'd have their housing already selected before the sophomore process even occurred. So a great option, helps fill up those spaces. But at the same time, they just can't go into station and Park Place. So making sure there's good communication there about what type of housing is the group looking for. Let's see. So again, just the clarity that February 10th is the big housing application due date. That is kind of when we know here are the people participating in the process. But processes themselves don't kick off until a few days later for juniors and seniors, and then a few weeks later for our rising sophomores, since we do kind of have that water flow effect of who we house when with LLCs and accommodation students and juniors and seniors and fraternity and sorority, and then our sophomores last. I know we often get asked the question about, my time is 2:28. Does that mean I'm going to get an apartment? Or what was the average selection time of the apartments from last year? And those kind of like, how likely is it that we're going to get something? It's not something that we're able to answer typically. Our processes do change from year to year enough that what time it took to get something last year can be different than this year. And so I don't like to, give you odds, but I'm certainly happy to always help. And my staff's great at talking folks through kind of the having an option, but having a backup option, because we'll tell you kind of what's the more popular options and maybe to be planning for that plan B and C just in case. So that can be certainly helpful. Let's see. So I'm seeing a lot of these good questions are being answered. There's some good questions here about annually flats and kind of how those flats work on that last day of rising sophomore selection. And yes, I'll be clear there too. So the first day of rising sophomore selection is only for 8-person groups. So if you don't have an 8-person group, they're not going to see anything for selection that day. If they have a 9-person group, they won't see anything. If they have a 7-person group, they won't see anything. Only if they've fully roommate matched with a group of 8 people will they see availability on that 8-person Dan Flats day. But on the last day of housing selection for rising sophomores, when we're doing residence halls, styles, and doing colonnades and global spaces and any remaining Dan Flat spaces, we do take that filter off And so students who are any size group, 1 person, 2 person, 3 people, 4 people, they're going to see annually flats available to them. So that means we'll have partial groups selecting into the annually flats on that last day. So the first day is a chance to kind of get an entire flat of people that you know, but maybe you don't have a full 8-person group and you have a 4-person group that really wants to live together. Maybe you wanted to try to get one of those colonnades 4-person pods, but there wasn't any available at the time that you select. You are going to see partial Danieli flats available. And so hopefully at that time, it's going to be half of a flat, like 2 fully open double rooms, but it could also be 2 double rooms and 2 different flats that are available at that time. And so sometimes our students, when they log into the system, and again, this is all visible, they can see it live starting at 9 a.m. when each process starts. They can be logged in and see it. They can always view what spaces are available. Oh, my space just got taken. Or, oh, there's no more apartments left. So they can see it live happening. They just can't make a selection until their actual time comes about. And so they can be watching it that day and going, oh, let's go with plan B now. Oops, now we got to do plan C. And so they can be ready for when their time comes. The person who's the earliest time is then clicking in and going, all right, I found a Dan flat. We had our top 3 options. Option number 2 still available. Put 4 people in the correct roommate matches in the correct rooms and click submit, and then they're good to go. So again, that's where that kind of watching it live and having a few plans does really help out. There's a few questions in here about leases and lease turnovers. And so I'll talk about that for a moment, but I would also point you to our website. We've got a lease turnover website, as well as that kind of apartments versus residence halls explained website. It really talks about what the difference is between those 2 styles of housing. And so if your student does select an apartment, again, it's a year-round lease they are committing to. So it's a lease year, June 15th to the end of May, typically May 31st. During that lease year, if they are going to be leaving Elon for some reason, there's only a couple of things that we would actually cancel the lease for. And so that would be like withdrawing from the university, transferring, something like that, taking a leave of absence. Oftentimes we require the student to fill that space if it's any other reason. So if they're studying abroad in the spring term, then they would need to be finding somebody to accept their lease turnover for the spring term. And so again, they could go on today at Elon, say, hey, I'm studying abroad for the spring term, looking for someone to take my lease in Oaks. It's a 4-person apartment with 3 women, and try to find someone to match up. Oftentimes you'll have that kind of, I was abroad in the fall, I'm abroad in the spring, let's match up, and I'll be there in the fall and you could be there in the spring. And all we require is that it's back-to-back leases, back-to-back dates, so we don't let the apartment be empty for winter term or be empty for one of those 2 terms, unless someone wants to do an apartment buyout. Again, a student is welcome to keep paying for the space if they're going to be abroad for the spring term. They could keep paying for that space the entire spring term, which lets them renew that space for next academic year, which is sometimes something that people want to do. But oftentimes they will kind of have those informal agreements with other folks saying, you're there for the fall, I'll be there for the spring. All they have to do is submit that lease turnover paperwork to us, an application on elon.edu/myhousing, letting us know here's who's living there when. But there is a little bit more legwork to do when it comes to apartments, because there is kind of a responsibility to the group that we want you to, as a group, select a space, as a group, keep the space filled. Because if your student, let's say a student takes a leave of absence for the semester and doesn't do a lease turnover to someone else, that means there's only 3 people in a 4-person apartment. And as residence life, we're going to assign somebody to that 4th bedroom space. And oftentimes these 3 folks would really appreciate not having someone, quote unquote, random living with them. And so oftentimes that lease turnover process is helpful to the students to be able to fill it with someone of their choosing. And so definitely something to talk with your student about if there's going to be any moment in the next academic year that they're going to be taking a step away from Elon, sitting abroad, taking a leave, whatever that might be, graduating early sometimes, and have a plan for what they're going to do with that apartment space at that time. There we go. Let's see, hopefully that helps a little bit on apartments and leases. And yes, year-long leases in Danieli, Danieli apartments, in Oaks apartments, in Park Place and Station. We have 5 apartment communities. 4 of them are year-round leases. We have 1, the Crest Apartments, that's a 10-month lease. That's August 1st to May 31st. So a little bit more affordable, apartment style, 4 single rooms, 4 single bathrooms, a little bit further from campus, again, still on campus. It's right there next to the Francis Center, next to the new pickleball courts as well, I saw the other day. Yes, that's the only one that is 10-month apartment lease. But the other 4 are year-round 12-month leases. All right. There was a question here about a group of 8 in a Daniel flat. Yes, if it's a group of 8, the only option available to them would be a Daniel flat. We have no other housing options that are for 8-person groups. And that group minimums website that talks to you about the different styles of housing and what size group you need to select from there would be helpful. All the costs for housing are located online. So you just go to the Versar's website for the cost of tuition website. It's right there. Housing and rooms all has it right there about what are the different apartment costs, what are the different apartment single double rooms. I know we're still working to post costs. I think for next year, usually it happens in February that they post costs for next academic year. So certainly take a look for that one. When they post for next year, but you can look at this year's pricing at least to get an idea of what it might be. If the student gets rejected or the student applies for an LLC and doesn't get accepted, where do they end up? So if they don't get accepted in the LLC process, again, there's a top 2 LLCs they can apply for. If they didn't get accepted to their top 2, then they would just go through the housing selection process. So one of those 3 rising sophomore processes, hopefully finding a roommate group to kind of increase their options. But if a single person doesn't have a roommate group, the only process they're participating in is that last day of rising sophomore process. That's the day when there would be spaces available for single folks in different residence hall spaces. All right. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Y'all have asked some really excellent questions. I know that we're going to take a look at the chat later too. Make sure we're increasing our information on our website, hopefully helping answer your questions. But I encourage you to keep in touch. You can call our office anytime during business hours. You can email us at residencelife@elon.edu. We've got a chat service as well for your students. So if they go to elon.edu/myhousing, that's where they do everything for us. They do their application, they do their roommate matching. If they have a question while they're doing it, there's a chat in the bottom corner. Tell them, ask Residence Life, just chat in there. During business hours, they will be chatting with our front desk staff, getting all their questions answered. So thank you for helping shepherd your students through this process. Let us know how we can partner with you, hopefully to make it less stressful, easier, and get a great option for where to live next year. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. And we'll post the video of this a recording of this webinar on our Elon Parents YouTube page. So it's youtube.com/@ElonParents. So that'll be up there this afternoon. And maybe we can get a copy of those slides that you shared as well, and we can put those up on our Elon Family Webinars website. So if you all need to look at the slides that Kirsten showed today, if you just Google Elon Family Webinars, the first link that comes up, we'll have a link to both the video recording and the slides. So thank you all very much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I believe the staff will stay on for a few more minutes and try to answer some of those questions in the chat. But for now, this will be the end of the webinar. We appreciate you all joining us.